Well, we're going to take some more calls on this in a moment. 0345 6060 973. But let's bring in now criminal barrister Chris Daw QC, who's a barrister at Lincoln House Chambers and author of Justice on Trial. And in terms of the right to protest, I asked Chris whether COVID safety concerns need to be a consideration.
Well, they do. I think there's a difficult balance here, Clive, because one of the things that I've been very worried about throughout the last 12 months has been that we've accepted so many infringements of our basic rights without any parliamentary debate, really. They've just come in on the back of ministerial diktat through regulations imposed by the Secretary of State. And for me, we live in a free country, and I'm, of course, like everybody else, deeply concerned about the impact of COVID. But I am worried when we just allow ourselves to lose all of those basic rights, including the right to protest, at the stroke of a minister's pen. I just think we may have gone too far in allowing civil rights to disappear from our society in the pursuit of a single policy goal of reducing infection. As a lawyer and as someone who believes strongly in basic human rights, it's something that causes me concern. And I'm not sure that the balance has always been right between the health interests of the nation and our basic human rights.
And as we come out of lockdown, hopefully that's the plan, at least with the roadmap, are you concerned as well? Are you worried that as the threat of COVID disappears, we'll end up still lumbered with these really tight restrictions? Is COVID somehow being used as cover?
Well, I think it is, and I'll tell you why. Because as you no doubt have been reporting, the government has just announced this week a new bill, with Priti Patel in the very forefront of it as Home Secretary, which will massively reduce people's right to protest. It's really very scary legislation, because what it says is that the police can effectively step in and stop any protest, even if it's causing an impact on one other individual. So the very purpose of protest, of course, is to alert people to the opinion of the protesters through often making noise and through marching through the streets, and sometimes through causing inconvenience to traffic and other people. And this legislation will effectively say, if you're impacting on one other person, the police can step in and say, you can't carry on with this protest. You've got to go home, or you're going to be arrested. And this is something that Priti Patel's quite proud of. And I'm not sure we would have accepted that remotely if we hadn't had these restrictions for the last 12 months. So I do think the government is using the fact that we've all got used to being told where we can and can't go as citizens, and they're using that as an excuse to make a permanent change to the law, which will prevent people from being able to exercise what I consider to be a perfectly lawful right of peaceful protest.
Inconveniencing one other person, that seems extraordinary. Almost every protest inconveniences somebody. But I'm kind of thinking back to the XR protests and Black Lives Matter. Not everybody was supporting those protests, and I got lots of callers from people saying it was going too far, it ruined their day, they couldn't get to work, there were streets blocked. There is a balance, isn't there?
There is a balance, and there always has been a balance. The right to protest is not absolute. You're not entitled to, for example, block the lawful activities of others indefinitely. But by definition, protest is going to inconvenience people, because otherwise it's not really protest. It's not going to really have any impact. And if you only allow protests which no one else can see, hear, or be in any way inconvenienced by, then you're in a situation where the government and the police are controlling people's rights to do something which has been fundamental to our society, for many, many years, going back to obviously the 1960s as an era of protest. But over the course of our history, and public protest has been an important way by which major change is brought about in our society. And of course, many people will be ringing your show and commenting that they don't agree with the protesters, but that's sort of the point as well. I don't agree with every protest, of course not least because you can often have two protests making opposite points at the same time. But I absolutely support people's right to get out there. Young people in particular who are often passionate about issues, they should have the right to get out there and make their voices heard. If you think about it, young people can't vote. So what other mechanism do they have if they're under 18 to make their opinions heard in our society? And the protests of young people are really important to me. And if older people don't want to hear them or know about them, well, I'm not sure that that's a reason to stop them altogether.
So this new legislation, is there a lot of opposition to it?
There's a huge amount of opposition to it, not just in relation to the laws of protest, but the legislation is a very wide-ranging bill which covers policing, the courts, sentencing and crime in numerous different ways, including very significant increases in prison sentencing for many types of offender, including young offenders, as it happens. And so there's a huge amount of opposition to it from professionals, from those who are experts in the criminal justice system, like myself, who can just see this as yet another example of Priti Patel, and supported by Boris Johnson and others in the government, looking to bring in draconian measures which restrict people's freedoms, which increase the amount of time that people spend in prison, often for crimes which in the past would have received relatively modest sentencing. And so we're just having a ratchet effect of more law enforcement, more police powers, and more infringements of our basic rights as British citizens, which are really precious to us as a society. And even those people who choose not to exercise those rights, I really hope will at least support other people having the freedom to go out and express their opinion in public places, and for our justice system to be a fair one. And I'm afraid this bill is yet another example of government legislation which is deeply unfair and will actually be counterproductive in its impact.
But Boris Johnson is a libertarian, he says, and he wants people to... He really didn't want to put any of the restrictions in place. He felt he just had to, and... So I'm a bit surprised that you say this. I mean, do you think this is part of some kind of broader plan? Why would they want to keep protests down for any particular reason?
Well, you have to judge Boris Johnson not by what he says, but by what he does. And what he's actually done, of course, over the years, is spout all sorts of things. But when it comes to his actions as Prime Minister and in government, he has supported every single infringement of liberty, every single increase in the use of prison and other forms of draconian sentencing, and all of the other sort of ultra-right-wing positions that Priti Patel, of course, is a huge fan of. And Boris Johnson has backed her every step of the way. And so, whatever his stated principles may be in terms of rights and individual liberties, he has been a prime minister which has done more to remove those rights from ordinary citizens than any prime minister since the Second World War. And it's a deeply frightening state of affairs. And I'm just not sure that people have, because we have been persuaded it was necessary in order to restrict the spread of COVID, I just feel like people have begun to accept that we are losing rights that we should be holding dear. And I think it's something that really people need to think carefully about before they blindly support it.
That's Chris Daw QC, author of Justice on Trial. And we'll take some more calls on this issue of the right to protest and what happened on Clapham Common last evening. 0345 6060 973. Lots more texts and tweets as well. And we'll look at some of those in a moment on LBC.